he or she will contact you, and it won't be by chance. It will be sudden, unexpected, like a wave that knocks you over when you thought the sea was definitely calm. You didn't force it. You didn't say anything. You just felt something. What if it was Allah sending you a signal? This video, it's not an empty promise. It might be your answer. Stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear could change what you've been feeling for months. Well, your heart isn't crazy. There are things you feel without being able to explain them. And sometimes what you feel is so strong that you start to doubt yourself. You think about this person. Again. Maybe you promised yourself you'd never think about them again. You even swore it was over, that you'd moved on. But still, the memory of them comes back. In waves, in bursts, without warning. And every time it happens, you ask yourself, why now? Why am I still feeling this way when everything is supposed to be over? You try to reason with yourself. You want to be clear-headed, strong, detached. But there's something in your heart that won't go out. Not like a fire, but like an ember. Silent, deep, persistent. So you ask yourself, am I weak? Am I clinging to an illusion? Listen carefully. Your heart is not crazy. It's not broken. It's not fragile. It's not a burden you must tame at all costs. Your heart is a sensor, a subtle tool that Allah placed within you to perceive what the eye cannot yet see. It sometimes senses before reality manifests. It senses. It adjusts. It opens to something your mind doesn't yet understand. Because the soul has its own guidance mechanisms. And sometimes that person who comes to mind isn't a distraction. Sometimes it's a reminder, a divine vibration, a heavenly permission to feel. You didn't force anything. You didn't try to relive those emotions. But they returned. And if they returned, it may be because they were reawakened, not by you, but by the one who knows the secrets of the heart. You know, there's a wisdom we often forget. When Allah wants to prepare for an encounter, He begins by softening hearts. He doesn't start with paths, messages, or calls. He begins with an inner stirring, a strange restlessness, a sudden tenderness. You think you're thinking of the other, but in reality, it's Allah who awakens in you the memory of a bond you've never completely abandoned. And be careful, this isn't about running after someone. It's not about losing yourself in expectation or illusions. It's about understanding that sometimes what you feel isn't an obsession. It's a divine invitation to prepare yourself, to purify your intention, to realign yourself with your role, to silently become the person you needed to be to receive this reconnection. You think you're hoping, but maybe you're simply answering an invisible call. It's no coincidence that your heart has reopened. It's no coincidence that at this precise moment you feel this person, as if they were about to knock on the door of your life. Hearts are in the hands of Allah, and when He decides that one heart must think of another, no logic, no silence, no distance can stop Him. There is no GPS for souls. They find each other by Allah's permission, not by likes, not through calls, through inner movements, imperceptible but powerful. And maybe what you're feeling isn't a lack. Maybe it's a resonance. Maybe as you watch this video, someone, somewhere, is feeling exactly the same thing as you. The same confusion, the same turmoil, the same inner return to something they don't yet understand. And maybe this is it. The true beginning. The beginning of what you thought was over. The beginning of a silent response. The beginning of an invisible movement that only Allah could initiate. So, why now? Why so suddenly? You think you don't have an answer, but maybe you just heard it. Keep going. 2. The story before the encounter. He or she was taken from you. Not slowly, not gently, not with explanations, but like a wrench. Brutal, unfair, incomprehensible. And you stared into that void. Without understanding how such a living presence could become such a heavy silence. You tossed and turned in your bed for nights on end, with this phrase playing over and over, "What did I do wrong?" But what you were experiencing wasn't rejection, it was detachment, not punishment, an interruption. Because sometimes Allah takes something away, not because it's bad, but because it came too soon. There was a crushing, yes, but it was intentional. Not by you, not by the other person, but by the one who knew what had to be broken, so that it could be rebuilt differently. You thought it was the end. You thought your heart had been mistaken. But in truth, what collapsed wasn't the bond. It was the attachment, the form, the immature version of what that bond could become. You couldn't remain the same person, and neither could he or she. So Allah placed between you two a separation filled with silence and pain, and not to keep you apart, but so that, each on your own, you would return to Him. You may have sought the person, but He wanted you to seek Him first. And meanwhile, someone, somewhere, was beginning to change. But not to come back to you, not to repair, not even to apologize. He or she was changing, because a weight in the soul had become unbearable. Because a void had opened where there had been only certainties. And this void forced an inner gaze, a return to Allah. It is in this kind of void that pride falls, that masks melt, that intentions are purified, that true "I love yous" cease to be emotional whims and become secret prayers. And you too changed. You were no longer complaining. You were lucidly waiting, sometimes even in renunciation. But a renunciation that doesn't close the door. A renunciation that lets Allah decide. It is in this form of sacred abandonment that many invisible reunions are prepared. It's not romantic. It's sacred. It's not a strategy. It's an orchestration. He or she was taken from you because something inside you had to die. A way of loving you, perhaps. A way of bonding without Allah at the center. A relationship where the ego had taken up too much space. And when that thing was broken, only then could another version of you be born, separately, slowly, spiritually. And while you thought nothing was changing, that everything was frozen in absence, someone, somewhere, was having a conversation with their own heart. Not to find you, but to find Allah. And that's when something changed, not in the situation, in the intention, in the perception. And you were experiencing exactly the same thing, so now you understand. It's not the right moment that creates the person. It's the person's transformation that creates the right moment. And maybe, just maybe, that right moment is closer than you think. But that moment isn't made of sweet words. It's made of truths whispered in prayers. It's made of silences healed. It's made of a heart gently knocking on a door it thought it would never open again. And you? Are you ready to hear the knock? Go on. 3. The breaking point. You couldn't take it anymore. You didn't say it out loud, but inside, it was screaming. You watched the days go by and nothing changed. You thought to yourself, what's the point? You had reached this point, this moment when you no longer wanted to hope, no longer wanted to believe, no longer wanted to feel because you were tired. Tired of reaching out to the sky and receiving only silence. Tired of believing a sign would come when nothing came. Tired of dreaming of a return when everything pointed to a definitive separation. You didn't give up on the person, you gave up, hoping that your heart would one day be at peace. And in that exhaustion, you said this simple but heavy sentence: I don't want to feel this anymore. Not because you felt nothing, but because you felt too much. And every sensation became a pain, a reminder of what you don't have, of what you no longer have, of what you no longer know how to wait for. And you thought it was all over. But in reality, that was where it all began. Because it's often when you touch the bottom of your heart that Allah begins to lift you up. Not because you ask so forcefully, but because you gave up everything, except Him. You no longer prayed for us to come back. You just prayed not to get lost again. And that's when the light slipped through. Not through answers, not through a message from someone else, not through some spectacular event, no. Through a strange peace. Through a calm you didn't expect to feel, even though you were broken. Through an inner light that whispered, I heard you. But it wasn't that person who heard your call. It was the one who holds all hearts in His hands. And when He answers, everything begins to move. Not like in the movies, not like in your expectations, but like in the plans He wrote long before you were born. You see, it's not necessarily that you miss the person. It's that your soul knows something is changing, something invisible, something divinely orchestrated. And suddenly, there are these signs. A dream you weren't expecting. A name you hear in a random conversation. A coincidence too strange to ignore. A silence that suddenly begins to make noise. You don't understand where it's coming from. But your heart starts beating differently again. Not with naive hope, but with this strange feeling. Something is coming. And you can't explain it. Because it's not logical. It's spiritual. It's that moment when Allah gives you back your heart, not to become attached to someone, but to feel what you were no longer capable of feeling. The possibility that something beautiful could return to your life. But this time, guided, purified, constructed. And you look around you, everything still seems the same. But inside, nothing is the same as before. Because you have changed in your pain. Because you have been heard in your silence. Because you were seen when no one was looking. And because now, the sky is slowly beginning to open. But that, you can't say it out loud yet. You can only feel it. And what you feel is not an illusion. It might be the answer you've been waiting for. Or the very beginning of a miracle you no longer dare to hope for. Keep going. 4. The invisible beat. Imagine two souls, scattered like distant stars in the darkness of an infinite sky. Two paths that have drifted apart, as if driven by invisible winds, each gravitating in its own night, carrying its own wounds, its muffled prayers, its heavy silences. But in the invisible, something begins to vibrate. A pulse, a discreet call, an imperceptible but real beat. Not a cry, not a word, a spiritual breath. A soft light begins to be reborn in the darkness. Not because they call to each other, but because Allah calls them back. not to the past, not to the illusion of a former us, but to an encounter rewritten in a dimension that only prepared hearts can traverse. It's not visible, and that's why it's so powerful. You look at your life and everything seems frozen. But on another plane, in another register that your eyes cannot yet perceive, something has already begun to move. Like two planets slowly pulled together by attraction, but which the human eye cannot yet detect. And you think you're waiting. You think nothing changes. But in truth, you're in the silent phase of destiny, where writing is written without sound, where celestial decisions take the form of an echo that slowly spreads. To you, a message is being born. It's not yet typed, not yet sent, not yet formulated, but it already exists. It exists in a thought that the other tries to repress, in a memory that returns uninvited, in a dream that leaves a name on the edge of sleep. And this message, it doesn't come from the other. It comes from the one who puts words in hearts before they leave the mouth. You sometimes feel your heart beating for no reason, as if a presence were approaching, as if the air were becoming denser around you, as if something or someone were brushing past you without being there. It's not an illusion. It's not nostalgia. Perhaps it's the invisible heartbeat, the one the other feels too, but which he or she doesn't yet understand, because souls, when they are connected in the spiritual sense of the word, can brush against each other without seeing each other, can call out to each other without speaking, can draw near, even in the distance. And in this silence, Allah is writing, not a story of return, but a story of return to Him through the other. And that's where the miracle is prepared, not in haste, but in the slow and precise orbit of destiny. And you don't have to force anything. You just have to keep your heart clean, free, silent, available. For it is in silence that the greatest encounters are heard, and an encounter, perhaps approaching, unconsciously, inevitably, supernaturally, continue. 5. What if it were now? What if the person you're waiting for was just a prayer away? What if the message you're hoping for was already ready, but suspended between doubt and submission? What if this wait wasn't a test of patience, but a test of trust? What if it wasn't a punishment, but a divine refining, preparing you to receive exactly what you asked for, but in the right version, at the right time, with the right heart? You say you're ready, but are you really? Are you ready to accept what you're asking for? With responsibility, not just with desire. With faith, not just with need. With purity, not just with nostalgia. You're asking for something in return. But what have you built since then? Have you healed what the other person touched in you? Have you healed what you unknowingly destroyed? You want a sign. But when you received it, did you acknowledge it? Or did you ignore it? You want to be chosen. But have you learned to stop begging for what wasn't meant for you? You want us to come back. But have you returned to the one who has always been waiting for you? Because sometimes, Allah delays an encounter so that you'll be less fragile when it happens. Not to punish you, to strengthen you, to purify you, so that this connection is no longer an escape, but a way to draw you closer to Him, and you continue to believe it's far away. But what if it were now? What if the person who left you was starting to feel what you felt yesterday? What if that heart, which you thought was extinguished, was rekindling, through the memory of you, but above all, through a return to God? What if you are on the verge of receiving, but your impatience was delaying what was already underway. What if what you're experiencing was the last test before everything changes? What if this connection that burns your heart wasn't there to make you suffer, but to bring you back to what's essential? Ask yourself the only real question. Are you ready to receive what you asked for? Not in its dream form, but in its reality, with its responsibilities, with its trials, with its need for maturity. Because it's not the person who heals your heart. It is Allah who prepares you to love without forgetting yourself. So, what if everything started to change now? Not outside, but inside. Keep going. 6. The movement has already begun. No. It's not in your head. No. You're not clinging to a mirage. Yes. Someone is thinking of you right now. Yes. Someone will make the first move. But not when you're ready. When Allah knows it's the right time. And that moment, it doesn't come. It's beginning. Slowly, silently, but surely. You're no longer waiting for a sign. You're in it. You're no longer waiting for a movement. You're being included in it. Things are moving. Even if you can't see anything, even if your phone is silent, even if the world seems frozen, decisions are made up there, not in a message, not in a glance, but in hearts, in the invisible, in this world where the slightest sigh carries weight and where souls are guided without GPS. You think you're waiting, but you're at the beginning of the decree. Something has been set in motion by your invocation, by your patience, by that night when you wept without words, and when Allah heard what even you could no longer articulate. And today, things are beginning to move around you, not on the outside, not in appearances, but in the subtle order that Allah establishes before revealing His will. There are hesitations in the air, thoughts that the other rejects, but which return, scenes that replay in their minds, regrets that take shape. And you, do you think nothing is moving? So why does your heart beat so fast when you think of this person? Why do you have this feeling? As if something were approaching you, without you yet being able to name it. It's not nostalgia. It's spiritual recognition. Your soul felt the approach before your mind. The movement has already begun, and not in an action you control, but in a dynamic you can no longer stop. Because when Allah decides to reconnect two hearts, no silence, no distance, no fear can stand in the way. And what you feel right now is not impatience. It's a deep intuition that a turning point is approaching, not a fairy tale turning point. A turning point of faith. A turning point where you will see that the waiting was not a void, but an invisible construction. He doesn't knock on the door. He's already opening it. Continue. Nothing happens without a reason. If you're still here, it's not out of curiosity. It's because something inside you knows this message spoke to you. So now, do two things. First, talk to Allah. Not to ask for the person, but to ask for what He knows is best for you. Then share this video with someone who's also waiting for an answer. Because sometimes, Allah sends us reminders through others.